What started as a way for Pogie and his friends to spend Saturdays and earn a few extra bucks has turned into a well-known local business over the last 40 years. After working for over 15 years in various restaurants and graduating from the Lorain County JVS Culinary Academy, Pogie's son James joined the family business, and together they have worked to expand the menu and offer catering year-round. As on-site culinary specialists, Pogie's Catering travels Northeast Ohio bringing great food and great hospitality to any event at the venue of your choice. This is the story of how Pogie's Catering was built.
Actually, this whole thing started with a buddy of mine, John Lang. He was a seafood salesman for Euclid Fish. And at the end of one of his days, he was in Mr. Larry's in Elyria. And a guy came in from Ridge Tool saying that he needed to do a clambake on Sunday. His cook didn't show up. And so he had to scramble around and find someone. Well, long story short, John asked me and another friend of ours, Jerry Draga, if we would help him. And not knowing anything about clam bakes, but he was a fish salesman, and I liked to grill, the three of us went out to a place called now Common Ground. At that time it was Country Day School camp. And that was around '82. And we put that on, not knowing what we were doing, but had a ball doing it. They loved us. We had a great time. And when we got done with that gig, we went the next day, had breakfast, and sat around and said, you know what? This is a pretty good side hustle. Maybe we'll keep doing this. So that first gig, back down in 1982, we each took $27 from the pot and threw the balance in and bought our first set of tongs and grill equipment. And that's how it started. That first year we did 7 clam bakes. And it was an interesting event. Learning every day we did one. We then called ourselves the Clam Busters as a spoof off of the Ghostbusters movie that was popular at the time. Well, after we grew, and again, this was a part-time thing for all of us, it got to the point where John Lang, Jerry Draga, got too busy and he backed out. And Captain Dick was a meat processor at Polanski's that used to do pig roast. And so we decided, or he decided, that it would be a good idea to replace Jerry with Captain Dick. So the second series of the catering business turned from the Clam Busters into Land and Sea Catering as we added Captain Dick. Captain then left Polanski's and opened up a seafood store in downtown Amherst, and we moved our operation to Captain Dick's there. At Wellington, when I taught there, graduation parties would look like I could go into that particular business doing chicken. So what we did was we did a couple of graduation parties for our students, for my students, and all I would provide would be the chicken. And what we'd do is I would go out with my Ranger pickup with the grill and one of the steam pots and cook 40 pounds of chicken legs and become part of the party, which I love. And that really sprung the business away from clam bakes and added a whole new set of grill work. When we first started doing the clam bakes, Euclid Fish, they used to do barbecue chicken. And that didn't seem like it went with the clam bakes to me. That's how I went to the chicken for the graduation parties, was barbecue. So I started playing around with a different type of chicken, and that came into what we call the lemon herb chicken that we do today. Also, at that time, I was experimenting with doing ribs. So the first menu off of clam bakes was barbecue chicken, and then barbecue chicken and ribs, and then the lemon herb chicken. So I started to build the base of the menu from there. Captain Dick was a pig roaster, and so we added that. And so the captain and I would do pig roast, I would do the barbecue chicken and ribs, and the three of us would do clam bakes. I think the business started to expand by just virtue of doing different events. And being an educator, I used to bring in leftovers into the building, and then all of a sudden the teachers would say, hey, this is pretty good. And word of mouth with good product, fun atmosphere, we started, and uniqueness, because at that time there was no food trucks like there is today. It worked. We added steaks, we added the pig roast, and we developed a pretty good menu of about 8 or 9 different selections. And as it grew in popularity, the hardest part I had was trying to find people to help me. Being a coach, I at Wellington would find some of the freshmen, sophomore football players, because I needed somebody that could lift the grills up and out of the truck. And they started helping me, becoming part-time workers. Once I went over to the JVS, which was about mid-90s, they had a culinary department. And now I could get people, kids that had an interest in food, plus understood the idea of sanitation and cooking processes, and that made my life a whole lot easier. To this day, a graduate from the JVS still is helping me. The equipment was purchased from that first time when we bought our first set of tongs and paintbrush to put the sauce on, has grown every year. The first grills that we had, we used to rent them. And I took the dimensions from the grills that we used to rent, and my dad, with his expertise and scavenging his potential places of grabbing scrap steel, he made the first 2 grills. And they lasted about 4 or 5 years because they were light, because I had to move them in and out of the truck, and then we learned about different varieties of grills. The first one, the grill top just sat on top. The second version had holes going down the side so I could lower and raise the grill as I lost heat or added heat. So the grills became very important to us. They also, then the size increased when I realized I could put 4 slabs across, or 15 slabs on a grill instead of 12. So I could cook more, be quicker, and it served its purpose. The other things, again, anytime we went to auctions or found somebody that had clam steamers or big pots, we were doing that, looking for those kinds of things. And then if we had to, we bought them new. A buddy of mine at the JVS, Dick Cormish, he built a grill for me after I explained what I needed. He put it on a two-wheel trailer, and the grill I could cook right from the back, and two arms would fold out, and I had the whole grill space that I normally had 2 grills in, so it was 2 by 10 on a trailer. And so what that did was it enabled me to pull in, set up real quick, cook, and then I could leave the charcoal in there and cover it, and so I didn't have to worry about what I did with the extra charcoal. That was one of the things I think that helped us expand, was the idea that we cooked on charcoal, not gas grills, and you had that charcoal flavor and smoke, which I think to this day is a big component of the flavor that we get. Well, our names started out as the Clam Busters because for the first 3 years, that's all we did clams, clam bakes. Then when we expanded with Captain Dick was added, we said, well, how do we put this together to say not only do we do the seafood, but we do the land, meaning the pig roast and the steak fries and those kinds of things. So I came up with the name Land and Sea Catering, and we were called that for several years. Then at some point, and I don't know who made the suggestion, my name was always Pogie, and they said, well, why don't you just call it Pogies? And I was a little apprehensive about that, because I didn't like the idea that I would be identified with a business. but it made sense. And so it was also a shortened version. I could put it on a hat, and it became Pogie's Catering. Well, as we kept getting older, and more experienced, we got bigger, and we were definitely doing more items. The menu increased, so we weren't just doing side dishes of corn on the cob and red skin potatoes. That's all we used to do. As I added students, they were able to do some side dishes, you know, the salads and the coleslaw, but we really needed a kitchen. So I went back to my buddy John Polanski and asked him what would happen if we took this little room and put a sink and a prep area, and call it a prep kitchen. And he was acceptable to the idea, and that's how the Polanski's prep kitchen came into play, was doing that. Once we did that, then the menu really took off and the side dishes came about. As we got more experience and I got older and the bones started to creak a little bit, I came to the end where it was time to retire and leave the business. That bothered me, since it started such in humble beginnings, to just walk away. But that was one of the options. There was an option of walking away, an option of trying to sell it, an option of turning it into a nonprofit, which I thought would have been a pretty good idea. Or one that I was hoping for was to pass it down to my son James, who was that student I referred to earlier that was still with me from the JVS. So as I contemplated those possibilities, I approached my son and said, "Hey, what do you think about carrying the business on?" He started, his claim to fame, by the way, is he shucked corn at 7 years old, which he probably ate more than he shucked. But he contemplated it several times. I'm sure did some research of his own. I looked at the nonprofit. That was a strong possibility, but it also didn't let me walk away from the business, but just was going to move it to a different direction. Selling the business, I really wasn't excited about that, and I certainly wasn't excited about walking away, although that was the second choice. And that's when I talked to my son, James, and he said he'd give it a shot. And I was ecstatic, and I think we are now in the 9th year of a 3-year plan to pass the business on. When my son decided that he was willing to dive in both hands and feet into the business, it had always been, at this point, a side hustle for me. For him to take it to a full-time position, we had to do some changes and make some investment. So the first couple of years, I wanted to see if he in fact really wanted to do this. I wanted to see if it could be a full-time position, because we only worked, as long as I had it, I only worked from May 1st to November. That was my season. So then that meant we had to find a permanent kitchen and become fully engaged in this. So it took us probably 2 years, maybe.
Yeah, probably 2 years.
To come across the place in Amherst with the Historical Society. And at that point, we had our first substantial business location, brick and mortar, and that's when we really decided that we're going to give it a shot.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the things for me, why this was necessary even to make it a full-time job, was you always worked in education. So you had your weekends, you had your summers off, is where I was food service. I worked in kitchens. So I was working every weekend. I was working all summer. So there really wasn't an opportunity for me to have the time off to do the catering events like there was for you.
True.
So the only way that I saw that this was going to be possible is if it was my full-time job. I think for me, trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? One of the big things was, well, what if we had a place we could rent out? What if we had a place where we could do events there? You know, would that help kind of fill in the calendar? So for me, moving out and finding a place where we could not only cook out of, but also bring people into and let them have their events there, that seemed to be the easiest way to start to fill in some of those dates. So, you know, how can I design a winter menu? And what I did was I looked at the menu that he already had and said, okay, well, what are some comparable dishes that don't have to be cooked outside? So we went from steak fries to prime ribs. We went from barbecued ribs to pulled pork. And I just sort of made little tweaks to the menu that he already had, and tweaked it in a way to where I could cook these dishes inside in a kitchen, on a stove, in ovens, and not have to be outside on the grills. What we have now is two menus. We have a winter menu and a summer menu. And as we kept going, we realized that we could do some grilling outside, but it had to be at our space. We couldn't take the grills out. So the items that we kept grilling had to be things that I could ship. So steak fries were out, prime rib was in, but we were able to bring barbecue ribs back.
And that expanded the whole menu. It made it, like you said, 12 months a year.
Yeah.
Where before, when we first started for the first 30-some years, our kitchen was that grill. You brought that piece into the business of what a trained chef would do, where I was just the grill master, as they say. The challenge of taking the business to the next level and a family business is that I struggled a lot with wearing the father hat and the partner hat.
One thing you always hear is don't go into business with family, but in this instance I don't see any way that it would have worked otherwise. Doing what we were doing, the business was already established, but we were adding so many different things all at once that it felt like starting a new business.
It also created something that I never had to worry about before, such as advertising to tell them we're open during the winter, that we were available for those Super Bowl parties, for their Christmas parties and that kind of thing, where I didn't have to worry about the weather and pulling the grills out. So we had a little extra cost now. We had our overhead. Before it was just working out of Polanski's and Cat and Dick's. There was no having to pay the electric bill and water bill and those kinds of things. So that was a challenge. So now all of a sudden we didn't have to just make enough money to pay for food costs and labor. We had to make food costs, labor, and the overhead.
And I'll never forget when we moved into the new building, I said, well, we got to get a dumpster. And I think that hit you like a truck.
Yes.
You've never had to get a dumpster. You just used the dumpster at the building you were working out of.
Right. That's that overhead that all of a sudden popped up. So it was a learning experience, a well worth one. I enjoyed it. And then just as we're starting to move, we're starting to really get this thing gelled together, boom, the pandemic hits. And we knew right away that we were going to be shut down because we operate as a caterer on mass gatherings. And that was the focus of not having them. So all of a sudden we got cancellations, people weren't going out, the whole world changed. And as a result, we didn't have any business. It made us look at what we do and how can we pivot and do something that makes some sense. And then it became your input, people coming in and picking up dinners. And at one point, I think that's what led to our holiday dinners, which you brought in. And again, I used to stop it in November, but now we do Thanksgiving dinners, Christmas dinners, Easter dinners, which is turned into a big part of our business.
You know, right as we came to the close of the 2019 season, and we sat down and had a talk and realized that, you know, that might have been the year that we turned the corner. We started to make a few bucks. One thing that concerned me, I think that was always an issue with you, was finding employees. And at this point I had found a handful of really good employees, and I wanted to figure out a way to keep them. We were open during the winter, but it was always much slower than that original summer season. And I started toying with the idea of what would some sort of lunch service look like. I figured if we could break even, I could keep employees through the winter, and I wouldn't have to keep going through this rehiring process every spring. And as I was having that idea, the pandemic hit, and we went into lockdown. And so taking that idea of, okay, what would a lunch counter look like? You know, our dining room, our inside seating at the clubhouse was small anyway. So the fact that you couldn't dine in didn't really matter. Let's do it all to go. And I remember talking with the health department a couple months in, and she said, well, we can do delivery events. If an event is less than 30, we can take the food, we can't serve it, we can do that. So okay, so we put out there that that's what we could do, and we did a handful of those. And then from there it moved on to, okay, well, you can serve a small event, but you have to have a plexiglass barrier
I remember those,
between
yeah.
the guests and the food. And so we had this big contraption built that we could break down and attach to a folding table and take with us and set up and safely serve a buffet. And we did that for a couple months. And then as winter hit, you know, there were still restrictions on gatherings. And so, okay, so people aren't going to do the 15-person Thanksgiving dinner like maybe they've always done. It's just going to be 4 or 5 people in their house by themselves. And I said, that's not worth cooking for. What if we cooked for it? That's something that from the pandemic that we kept. Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter dinners are big sellers for us every year. You know, what kind of packages can we put together? So we have our graduation menus, we put together a Thanksgiving menu, put together a Christmas menu and an Easter menu. And those are all things that we offer that wasn't always part of the plan. In addition to that, as time went on, we realized, you know, we could only pack up all of our equipment and go to so many events in a day. But that shouldn't limit the amount of business that we do. So where we were always just full service catering, now we have a pickup menu.
Well, you know, we kept growing and getting very comfortable with the clubhouse over at the Historical Society. And when that arrangement was made, we thought it was going to be for life. We talked about, you know, the future and the possibilities we had, and we were there for 7 years at the clubhouse. And one day, the board and the executive director came in and said that they were going in a different direction, and we're going to concentrate solely on bringing outside historical events to the property, and it was time for us to leave. So we had many discussions on locations and what we should look for. We looked at dozens of properties, and we finally made a decision and said, you know what, if this is going to be a full-time job till you retire, we need to find some place that's affordable, that can be utilized to suit our needs. It had a great location, and that we can function out of.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was important for me was, you know, after moving into the clubhouse and becoming not just caterers but an event venue as well, when we were looking for a place, that had to be included. I didn't want to go backwards. Just finding a kitchen to me would have felt like going backwards. It had to be a space that we could also turn into a venue.
Right.
That was important. That was, to me, that kept us moving forward instead of 2 steps back to take 1 forward. Having the Historical Society come to us when they did and say that they were moving in a different direction and that they wanted the property where the clubhouse was to hold their own events, and that we basically had to leave, hit me pretty hard. And I didn't want anyone else to ever have the ability to be in control of my business, of my future. And so when that happened, I remember looking at you and saying that we have to buy. We can't rent. I don't want to give someone else the ability in 5 years to say, hey, you gotta go, I'm selling the building. Hey, you gotta go, I wanna do something else with the property. We had to be in control of our future, and the only way I could see that was by buying a property and not being renters anymore.
Well, one of the things that I saw when we had to move, there was actually two philosophies I had. One, I never wanted to own the place because then you could walk away from it if you're done. Similar to one of my choices when I decided to retire. The second thing was when we started looking for other places, I wasn't interested in remodeling and putting money into a commercial kitchen for somebody else. Yeah. It's a big undertaking, and so from that aspect, I felt like we had to buy. By having our own property now, it's kind of gives the foundation for the business that we're setting permanent roots. We're now going to be here for a very long time. So it'll help, especially here, with our recognition on the highway being here, where before we were back in the dead-end street. Them building new housing close by will give us exposure and should open up another avenue of ways to do business. You know, maybe it's delivery, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. We don't know what the future holds, but now it gives us opportunity. And I think that's the biggest key to a future, is having the opportunity and then being able to take advantage of that opportunity.
You know, we knew we were moving about a year before we broke the news to the staff. I wanted to make sure that we had a place and we're going to be able to continue before I mentioned anything to them. So over the last year or so, when we're working, we'll kind of talk about it in the kitchen and, you know, what can we do, and something that Johnny, our cook, pointed out was how much we've added and how much we've changed just since we moved into the clubhouse. So I think the potential here is really unknown. It's going to take a while for us to be in and realize, hey, you know what we can do?
Right.
Hey, you know what might work here? The possibilities are endless. It's a whole new ballgame, really.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It is.
It's exciting, and I think that the staff is on board and they've gotten excited. And I know that people that I've spoken to ask me all the time, hey, you ready to open? You're going to be open? When you open it? When we get to see it? So there's a buzz of going around it, and so it's exciting. We are presently, as we speak now, about a month out of hopefully moving in. Yeah.
Our season, even though we're 12 months a year, our busiest time is April till Christmas, and so our plan is to be open by the start of what we call our summer season, which starts at the end of March, beginning of April, with the venue itself being ready sometime in May or June.
Thanks for joining us on a wild ride.
We look forward to cooking for you soon.